Okay, can you guys hear us?
Whoops.
You're loud and clear, Jennifer.
Great. Okay, so normal disclaimer, the only official record of this meeting will be the minutes that we put out and the YouTube on the official task force YouTube channel. And I'm going to turn the meeting over to Carl, our chair, and you can start whenever you like.
Okay, it's 10 o'clock. We'll go ahead and get started. And just some housekeeping items. If you're attending in person or remotely, please sign in. To unmute on the phone, press *6. To unmute on the web conference, click the microphone on the bottom toolbar, or Control-D also works. And always identify yourself before speaking. Our first item is call to order. And we'll start with a roll call.
Okay.
Oh. Okay. And also, if you're in the room speaking, please press the button on the microphone in front of you. It'll turn green.
Sound so that they'll hear the people on the.
Yeah.
And then
Carl-
unmute when you're done talking.
Carl,
Yes,
I can't find the sign-in link. Can we drop it in the chat or?
It's gonna be on the task force website
it's on the
Yeah.
task force website
and there isn't any chat.
I don't
and
see
there's
it.
no chat.
Okay, so yeah, the sign-in is going to be on the task force website, and I will start roll call. So CCI, Scott James, Tina Powell, Julie Nelson, or Allison Theunison. Okay, our CML is vacant. Jeremy Shepbach has left the state, and I know he has a replacement that was announced at PSCS, but I can't remember who it was, so I need to send him the invite. Accessibility is also vacant. At large, Michael Berry or Trina Doomer.
Michael is here.
Good morning. BESP, Tressa Carter or Tim Kunkelman.
Tressa Carter's here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
BESP, Ryan Sargassi from Entrado. I elect Jeff Winkleman Lumen.
Jeff Winkleman, present.
Good morning. I elect Jason Hendricks with Range.
Yep, this is Jason.
Good morning.
Morning.
Wireless, Jenny Santana, T-Mobile.
Good morning, this is Jenny.
Good morning. Wireless, Ryan Hoke or Mary Graham with Viero.
Good morning, this is Mary.
Good morning. CLEC, Cindy Hartkop or alternates with Cinch.
Cindy's here.
Good morning. CLEC, Jay Slater or alternates with Bandwidth.
Yep, this is Michelle McGuire filling in for Jay Slater.
Thank you. 911, Jody Chin.
I'm here. Good morning.
Good morning. 911, Cindy Castile. Or alternate.
This is Matt, alternate.
Yeah, Sean's here too.
Good morning, Matt. 911, Kimberly Culp or alternates.
Good morning. This is Kimberly Amon.
Good morning. 911, Jackie Reynolds, AdCom.
This is Jackie. I'm here.
Good morning. 911, Beth Dobransky. Beth might be on the phone, but sometimes in other meetings she doesn't have audio, so I'll check back with her. 911, Valicia Librand with Sterling or alternates.
It's Paula Nall for Valicia this morning.
Thank you.
Yep.
911, Jeff Irvin.
Jeff Irvin's present.
911, Renee Henshaw.
Present.
911, Deanie Shin or alternate. Andrew Dameron.
Good morning.
Good morning. 911, Kyle Mickelson or alternate.
I am here. Good morning.
Morning. 911, Tina Bonetta or alternate. Kathy Rayleigh.
I am here.
Morning. 911, Matt Gage or alternate.
Good morning.
Good morning. 911, Carl Stevens.
Here.
911, Patty West or alternate.
Patty West is on.
Thank you. Good morning. And you do have a quorum.
Thank you. Next item is approval of the July 10th meeting minutes. They were posted in the file folder. Is there any changes? Has anybody reviewed the meeting? If not, can I get a motion, or if they have approved them, no changes, can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
Jeff Irvin, I'll move to approve as written.
Jeff, thank you. Can I get a second?
Tracy Reed.
Thank you. Any opposed? Seeing none, the minutes are approved. Okay, our next item is a presentation laboratory to combat human trafficking by Kara Napolitano. She should be online.
Actually, it's going to be me, Michelle Metz, who's going to be doing
Okay.
it today. One issue that I'm having though is I can't share my screen. Is it possible to give me co-hosting abilities?
Yep, give me 1 second.
And while we're doing that, I want to thank everybody for being on and listening. I've got a whole lot of information and not a whole lot of time. So I'm going to go a little bit quick, kind of feel like this is a bit of an amuse-bouche to hopefully, whet your appetite for later and to maybe potentially want some more training. I'm with the Laboratory to Combat Human Trafficking, and we provide we provide lots of human trafficking care basically in the state. We provide trainings to anybody. We do these trainings for free. So if somebody would like to have a training, or you listen to this and you're like, oh, I want to actually bring this to my agency, just reach out to us and we can do that. And like I said, we do that for free. We run the statewide human trafficking hotline, which we'll talk quite a bit about as we go on. My background, just so you are aware of that, is I actually am a forensic nurse by, so sorry. I'm a forensic nurse by training. I started out as a paramedic a really, really long time ago and had probably irritated more than one dispatcher in my days, I'm sure, especially those 3 a.m. phone calls. So I was a paramedic. I was a tech in the emergency department. I currently work at Denver Health. I've been there for the last 25 years, and I've been involved with the Laboratory to Combat Human Trafficking since 2017. I was one of the first, not one of the first, I'm sorry, but I was one of the people who they'd reached out to help develop a trafficking training that was specific to people who provide healthcare, be it EMS, dispatch. When we're interacting with patients, that's kind of what I was there. I was part of a work group, and it included, sorry, I'm multitasking and I'm not great at that. It had included people with lived experience and then also healthcare providers. So we'll talk a little bit too about being a trusted provider with the Laboratory to Combat Human Trafficking's hotline. And so I was one of those. If they have somebody who had reached out, who had been trafficked, who needed health care, I was one of those people who they could rely on to help and care for somebody. So we had also, and I'm going to have a couple of stories about people with real life lived experience that have either interacted with the lab or perhaps interacted with us at Denver Health. I want you to know though, when I do talk about these things, this is not to be sensationalistic whatsoever. This is just to kind of bring it home. I think, there's a lot of ideas about what trafficking is, especially when you look at what we see on TV or in movies. And I just want to help you to realize that these are real life scenarios that we've encountered before. So hopefully by the end of this training, you're going to understand some of the nuances that make trafficking different from other crimes. Now, it doesn't take the other crime out of it, but one of the reasons why it's actually worthwhile to know if it potentially is trafficking is it opens up an entire world of resources to patients potentially. And we don't want to miss those resources if we can utilize them. It's kind of like housing. Housing, I don't know if anybody in any of your communities has lots of access to housing. We certainly don't. We have a hard time with it. But having trafficking be a part of it could potentially open up some other housing options. So that's why it's worthwhile to know what those nuances are. You don't need to be an investigator. That's not the idea. You're not there to debate whether or not something is or what a crime is, but understanding those things is helpful. Ways to identify some potential victims. So as you all are receiving phone calls, either be it from a bystander or somebody who's reaching out, some of those things that are enough to make you kind of go, oh, wait, I think there's more here going on. And maybe perhaps sending that over to, if it's law enforcement, EMS, or fire, who's going to be responding, just giving them a little bit of those thoughts about, hey, look, there's something that I heard that sounds funky. You may want to look at that. Why we want to have protocols. We're going to talk a little bit about protocols. You know, we can talk about all of this ad nauseum, but if people don't know what to do if they identify something or something sticks out, a lot of times they're not going to ask, or they're not going to say, hey, look, I noticed something. I'm certain all of you have your basic dispatch protocols anyhow, right? So having something, even if it's a bullet pointed kind of paper, like, hey, I heard this, I'm concerned about this, and here's what to do, is super helpful. And the lab will help you develop those protocols if you want. And then know what your resources are. If you have a referral, who to call. I will plug over and over about the hotline, just because I personally have utilized it. I've given it to patients. It is a great resource. So, but knowing what your resources are. When we are finished, also, you will receive an email. If it's not, I don't think I have everybody's email address, but I will send an email out, and then it can be distributed to everybody with just a ton of resources. I realize you're all from a really large group, which is so amazing to have this big of a group all basically in the room together from all these diverse areas, and you have somewhat diverse needs. So I want to make sure that we give you resources that are going to be helpful. So why are we here? Why are we even doing this? Back in 2017-ish, there was a study that had happened that had looked at yeah, and granted, right? Remember, with our numbers, there's lots of studies, there's lots of different ways of coming up with numbers and whatever. This was one of them. But almost 88% of survivors had had contact with healthcare providers, some form of a healthcare provider, while they were being trafficked. A lot of them were treated in the emergency room or an emergency department setting, an emergency setting. But when you look down here, the bulk of healthcare providers did not believe that their patient population was affected by trafficking. That's an obvious disconnect, right? There is no way that all of those patients only went to 26% of facilities. That's just not the case. We know that that's not the case. Also at that time, we were getting calls on the hotline from healthcare providers going, hey, look, I saw this and I don't know what it was. I think it might have been that, but the patient is gone now. So how could I do better? So that was why we developed this training, to make it accessible to people. So what is trafficking? You know, I normally I'll ask questions from people like, what have you heard? Like I said, we're going to try to do this on the quick side. So typically this is what I hear, right? You hear Taken, the movie Taken, Sounds of Silence. I don't know if any of you have like an Aunt Sherry. I have an Aunt Sherry who every social media post that she sees that includes somebody putting a zip tie on the handle of your car means that somebody is about to traffic you. That's not the case. And no matter how many times I tell Aunt Sherry, hey, look, let me try to educate you, she wants nothing to hear from me about any of that. She's like, nope, this is what social media says, and this is what trafficking is. Well, it's not. Trafficking really is exploiting vulnerabilities. We always typically what you hear is sex trafficking, and it's the sex trafficking of young girls, particularly white girls or Asian girls, you know, hypersexualized. But the truth of it is it's almost, when you look at globally, it's almost a 50-50 split between genders, gender expressions, also between labor and sex trafficking, or labor trafficking is more than sex trafficking, but that doesn't sell movie tickets, right? That doesn't get people all up in arms on social media when they're seeing labor trafficking. Just doesn't get people up in arms or excited about it. It's those other images is what gets people to pay attention and clicks and what have you. So the basic definition, I mean, this is just the basic definition of what human trafficking is. It's a severe form of exploitation for labor, which includes sex through the use of force, fraud, or coercion. I mean, that's just the very basic definition of it. it occurs in legal markets. We've got, especially you in your rural area, in the rural areas, right? Agriculture is a spot where you see a lot of labor trafficking and nobody is watching. There's not as many people around to see what's going on. Construction, domestic servitude. I want to give you an example of domestic servitude. Somebody is brought over here to potentially be what they think is an au pair. They're being brought over. Perhaps they sign a contract to come over. They're going to take care of someone's children, help take care of their home. They're going to be allowed to go to school. And when they get here, as provided with some living expenses and also or living conditions. So they'll have a place to sleep, they'll have a room and all that. They get here, it turns out that living conditions are actually in the basement with a blanket, and that's it. Their paperwork is taken from them for safekeeping from the owners of the home. They're forced to care for the children 18 hours a day, not allowed to leave, not allowed to go to school. Perhaps they are sexually or physically abused by the homeowners, and then they're forced to overstay their visa, and now they're an undocumented immigrant. We've had multiple cases of this here in Colorado. This is, that I think that's the other part too. We hear things like P. Diddy and what have you that gets sensationalized, but these are all, it happens in Colorado, and it's not perpetrated by movie stars or people who are super famous. It's perpetrated by people in our communities also. Illegal markets, there's legal and illegal sex work, but illegal sex work, forced criminality is another thing that we're seeing quite a bit here in Colorado. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So we're going to spend a little bit of time on this slide. So there are basically 3 categories of trafficking, and under 18 involved in commercial sex. So we have decided as a society that if you are under the age of 18, you do not have the cognitive ability to consent to commercial sex across the board. This can get a little confusing. We'll talk about that in a second, but if you're under 18, there's no such thing as a teen prostitute. There's, teen Lolita, you read some headlines and stuff like that, that isn't actually a thing. If you're under the age of 18, you cannot consent to commercial sex. For those who are 18 and over involved in commercial sex through force, fraud, or coercion, and then those who are forced to perform labor. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples, and these are people who we've worked with at the lab. There was an 8-year-old boy, and he loved school. And the reason why he loved school is because it was his safe space, would never miss a day. Because when he left to go home, when he went home, he was being trafficked for sex by his parents. So they would have people in their home, they would take him to motels, they would take him to Broncos games to sell him for sex. The bulk of that was they would utilize Craigslist when it was still more a thing for those types of encounters, and also Facebook Marketplace. And so he was sold for sex. Now, I want you to think about this, right? There's no question when we're talking about an 8-year-old that he was being trafficked. We know that he can't consent to that. That's not something he would consent to. Also think about the challenge with the fact that it was his parents who were his traffickers. And 30% of the time when somebody's being trafficked, it's not strangers. 30% of the time it is parents, guardians, or some family. So does that not make things really complicated too? But nonetheless, if you all are fielding a call and it's about this 8-year-old, there's no question in anybody's mind that's what's happening to him, and what is happening is not okay. We had another person who we've interacted with at the lab too, and she grew up in a very abusive home. There was lots of physical and sexual abuse in the home. She became a teenager, started running. She was self-medicating for the things that were going on in her life, with substances. She, every time she would run, she was brought back to her parents, and I don't know if anybody asked her why she was running, but she was brought back to her parents. So she definitely had a distrust of systems and adults. Well, when she was 16 years old, she ran away and she was from Kansas originally, and she came to Colorado. she got to Colorado and quickly learned that she could trade sex for necessity, you know, a place to live, food, shelter, clothing. Um, here's where it can become complicated, right? She's still a victim of trafficking, even if she hasn't had somebody who would say, "Hey, I'll manage you," meets up with her to be her pimp per se, right? Even though there isn't somebody who's profiting off of her in this situation, she is still a victim of trafficking because she cannot consent to commercial sex. And so commercial sex doesn't necessarily have to be for cash either. It's for something of value. So here's where that can be problematic, right? Because we're like, well, wait, if there isn't somebody to hold accountable for what is happening to her, now odds are she will have had somebody who has reached out to be her pimp. But if she doesn't have somebody who's reached out to her, us identifying that she's actually being trafficked will open up those resources. That's where this actually is super helpful. But you know, odds are, like I said, she probably does have somebody who has stepped in to manage her or to, again, to be her pimp. But think about this. So with her though, she's dressed provocatively. She could very well be high on substances. And she's liable to be kind of sassy, you know, not real excited about being there or about being approached by EMS or anybody else. And so she's a lot tougher. So if she's 16 or 17 years old, can you see where sometimes people have a harder time seeing her as a victim versus that 8-year-old? It's just it becomes it's complicated. A lot of when I'm finished, unfortunately, you're not gonna go on with your meeting and go, oh yeah, now I feel like I can handle all of this. Some of this is really, really gray and complicated. It's not black and white. But those things are. So if you're under 18, you cannot consent to commercial sex. Another person who we had worked with so she had a baby. She was 18 years old, 18, 19 years old. Her mom was like, hey, look, you can live with me. I'll work during the day, you work at night. We'll raise your kiddo together. And you know, we'll handle this together. We'll do this as a family. So she'd gone through a couple of jobs and then she finally landed on one, stripping. So stripping is legal. It's legal sex work, right? It was a great job for her. She was making really good money. She was able to be with her kiddo all during the day. She would put her kid to bed, go on into work. She was having fun. So after working at the facility or at the club for a couple of months, at the end of the night, one night, her boss comes in and says, hey, look, I have a client over there. He just paid me $200 to have sex with you. And she was like, yeah, no, I'm a dancer. I don't do that. He closes the door. He threatens her and her family and beats the crap out of her. And she goes and has sex with the client. Her boss gives her $50 and says, go on. Now, do you think she stopped and went to the police afterwards or called 911? No, I mean, one of her concerns is they would think that she was a prostitute. And depending who's sitting at the desk, maybe that would be the case. Again, she's dressed provocatively, she's stripping. And sometimes that internal biases can be a problem, right? So she went home, she took a shower, she got up the next day and she went to work again. So her boss continued to exploit her for a while and then she had finally left. So something important about the three of these people, right? All three of them. You have one that's going to school regularly. They're walking around among us. They are, you know, they're there in our community. Do you think any one of them knew that they were being trafficked or had the words to call it trafficking? I'm going to say no, but they're there in our community and we see them. Another one, we're going to talk more about labor trafficking, but if you're forced to perform labor and you don't have a choice. I had somebody who had a question about it and it's like, what is the difference? Well, it's like when somebody doesn't feel like they can say no or get out of it, that's what the difference is. Forced criminality. So when we're talking about forced criminality, it is somebody being forced to commit a crime. And we'll talk about force, fraud, or coercion and all of that, but they don't feel like they have a choice. Now, immigration, when you're talking about bringing somebody up, right? So smuggling is a crime against a border. Trafficking is a crime against a person. So one instance where we may see some forced criminality is somebody pays money to be taken across the border to come into another space, right? They come across the border, and then when they get here, the coyote, the person who has transported them over, is like, you know what, actually, you owe me $5,000 more. Person's like, I don't have $5,000, and like, if you don't pay me, I'm going to hurt your family. So a lot of that can turn into labor trafficking. So I have a construction site where you can work, and you can work off this debt that you'll never be able to work off. But another instance is I have these drugs that I need to be taken across to California. If you get arrested, obviously, if you get pulled over, obviously don't say something. So person has no paperwork, no anything else, is driving across the board, or driving these drugs to California, you know, 50 kilos of cocaine in the trunk, gets pulled over. And what does law enforcement see? They see an undocumented immigrant who is transporting drugs across and do you think they're going to say, hey, look, my smuggler forced me to do this? No. Another person who we've interacted with at the lab was, when he was younger, his dad was gang affiliated. And when he was 8, 9 years old, they started teaching him how to steal cars. He was really, really good at stealing cars. If you start at that young of an age, he, you know, plus think about the fact that there's this inherent distrust for people in positions of power in that situation. So at 12, he got arrested selling or stealing cars. Now, do you think that he was getting a check when they dropped the car off the chop shop to be, you know, pieced out? No, he wasn't. When he got arrested, also, you know, once you're 10, you can be charged with a crime here in Colorado. And when he got arrested, he didn't say, my dad's making me do this. Didn't realize he was being forced to do these things. He was actually subsequently, he was charged, convicted, and then incarcerated in a juvenile detention center for auto theft. I recently took care of a patient who was 15 years old, and from the time she was 13, her mother had been forcing her to go out and sell drugs. Again, I want you to also really hone in on, these were their parents who were trafficking them, who were forcing them to do things. Think about that, right? It's, you know, even when your parents do bad things to you, you still love your parents. So that creates another level of challenge. So what are the things that we need to be able to prove that something is trafficking? I love this slide because I think it's super, super simple. Notice that means has a little asterisk, the star by it, because for those who are under 18, you don't need force, fraud, or coercion for it to be trafficking. But this is basically, you need one from each group. So think about the purpose. So it is somebody is profiting off of somebody else. For example, you know, a man is abusing his child, sexually abusing his child. That is child abuse, that is sexual assault. It's not trafficking. However, if he is taking videos of it and uploading it on OnlyFans or one of the sites and receiving money for it, that would put it in the realm of trafficking. Or he's inviting his friends over and they are paying him in drugs to have access to his child. That would be, that in itself too would also be profiting off of that sex assault. Means, like I said, you don't need it for anybody who's under 18, but means is force, fraud, or coercion. You don't need all three. You only need one. And the one that is most commonly used is coercion. If I tell you I'm going to hurt your family, that gives a lot of leverage. People will do a whole lot of things. I mean, even take trafficking out of it. Think of the things that people do because they're afraid that somebody is going to hurt them or somebody who they care about. So it's coercion is what we usually see. When we're looking at action, so you don't need to have that transporting thing. Sometimes people are transported, you know, sometimes they are taken from down here up to the mountains or someplace else. That does happen. However, you don't need to have transportation. Remember with the young boy that I was talking about, they had people coming to their home. Recruitment is what you most often hear. Recruitment can be those signs on the street corner about, come and work for $5,000 a month. Or Facebook is utilized a lot for recruitment. One of the nurses who worked for me, her son, he did have substance use issues. So he had vulnerability, but he was recruited off of Facebook to go to Seattle, to go to Washington. Actually, I think it was just to sell windows. They then took them to Washington. He had and his mother, I remember her going, this just seems really sketchy to me. But of course, he's 18 years old, 19 years old, isn't going to listen. He gets in the van. It was a van. They took his ID. They had brought him to Washington State, and he had a quota. They were sleeping in the van. They had no place to go. If he didn't hit his quota, he wasn't given food or any water that day. But he was recruited off of Facebook. I mean, he wasn't, that was fraud. He wasn't given what it wasn't what he thought he signed up for, but that was recruitment. Harboring is when you have, and we do actually see a tiny bit of this, where somebody is kept like in a hotel room, or the way I tend to see it at work is somebody is in a hotel room, they're kept really high, they're trafficked, and then all of a sudden kind of let go. But that's where somebody's kept in a space, a house or a hotel room, a trap house. We talked about transporting. Providing is, I provide access to my child because I'm 6 months behind in my rent. So I provide access to my child to my landlord. And then obtaining is that Taken, the movie Taken or the snatched off the street. That is like a 1 to maybe 3% of the time. We just don't really see that. Exploiters, traffickers exploit vulnerabilities. There's something about the person, and that's what they're doing, is exploiting them. It's not that kidnap sort of scenario. Again, it sells great movie tickets, right? People want to see that. It's very dramatic and Liam Neeson, but that's not what we tend to see. So like I said, 30% of the time it's parents, guardians, or family who are traffickers. 40% of the time it's their intimate partners, boyfriend, wife, husband. It's somebody who they feel like the person who's being exploited feels like that they are in a relationship with. 27 to 29% of the time is somebody in a position of power that they know. So a boss, most frequently, a coach. We've had coaches, we've had scout leaders and teachers here in Colorado who were the traffickers. So, we're talking 1 to 3% of the time it's actually a stranger who is the trafficker. So what are some of the push and pull factors that make somebody vulnerable to being trafficked? And we'll talk, that's what I'm trying to get across, is it is a vulnerability that somebody steps in and exploits it. So, you have abuse, neglect, isolation. A human need as a relationship. So if you've grown up in a home with lots and lots of abuse, or you're in a very abusive relationship, what you want is a relationship, and somebody's willing to step in and say, hey, I got you. I love you. I will be your person, right? That's filling that need. It's filling that void. Somebody who's unhoused. That is a great kind of pivot tool to use on somebody. Because you want a home, a place to go. Hey, look, I've got a place for you to stay. I got you. I got a place for you to stay. Can you see how somebody going in and filling that void can help to make them more vulnerable? Poverty, debts, that lack of access to formal markets. So a couple of years ago, when we had that large group of Venezuelans that had come up, so we had gotten like 40,000 people who were bussed up here. 20 subsequently stayed in Colorado, and 20 had left. But when you don't have access to formal markets, and I'm not just talking immigrants, I'm talking also adolescents, teens who have fled the home, perhaps people who have fled domestic violence relationships, and they maybe don't have access to their paperwork or what have you. But when we had that group of people, now neither of them were trafficked, but they were both sexually assaulted. And just to kind of put this on here, right? You just want the ability to work or some income. So with the one gentleman who I took care of, he was young. He was outside like a Home Depot kind of situation where day workers would go. Somebody came up, they communicated all via Google Translate and came up and offered a job doing some yard work. Guy hops in his car to go do yard work. Gets there, he does all the yard work. The guy's like, "Hey, you did a great job. I have some work up in my closet. Can you come on up there? I want to show you and have you do that there." Kid's like, "Sure." And he was in his early 20s. Gets up there and he was sexually assaulted by the guy who had taken care or who had brought him to his home to do work. I also, that same week, it was a rough week. We had a woman who somebody offered to take her to buy diapers, but wanted her there to buy those diapers. She got in the car to buy them, to go get them, and she was also sexually assaulted. So can you see that vulnerability that's there though, right? That kid wanted to work. He wanted to be able to do stuff, but it left him vulnerable. Marginalized identity and discrimination, 40% of homeless youth are LGBTQ plus kids. So if you don't fit into your family's idea of what is normal or your community's idea of what is normal, it's a vulnerability and you just want to be accepted. So somebody who doesn't fit into that, right? Someone else who walks in there and says, "Hey, look, I love you for who you are." Again, can you see where that vulnerability is potentially being it's exploitable? Foster care is, this foster care is been considered like a kind of like the path to trafficking just because they don't have stability. There is that they're used to being moved around. They don't necessarily have a say. They are, they're used to people getting money to take care of them. So it's not a far stretch when you find somebody who, again, to be part of the family, you need to contribute. So child sex trafficking and labor trafficking now are a form of child abuse and neglect. So whatever your mandatory reporting requirements are, they're in place for this. I do know in the past month or so, some of our mandatory reporting stuff has changed when it comes to confidential advocates. I don't think that would apply to you all, but if you are considered mandatory reporters, you need to report suspected. We don't need to know. We don't need to investigate. That isn't the expectation. But if you suspect that's what's going on, you need to report it. And that should be in your protocol. People just want to know about online stuff. It is a hugely potentially dangerous space. And that's where we live. Like I was talking about the nurse who worked for me, her son was recruited for labor on Facebook to be trafficked. Again, we are online all the time. You almost can't get away from it. Our kids definitely are online. They have this belief that the people who they are talking to are truly their friends or somebody who they know, which isn't the case. But you see it with adults too, where they're duped and then they completely clean out their entire savings because we had one of our housekeepers, his daughter, this was a few years ago, was certain she was talking to John Stamos. And this is an adult. This woman was an intelligent woman. She just kind of went down that path and was certain she was talking to John Stamos and he just needed $50,000 from her, but he was going to pay it back with an extra 50 and cleared out her bank account. It's just, and people can communicate with you all over the place. I play that stupid King game. I had no idea that people could actually send me texts on it. So again, it's a great place for people who are grooming kids to get lots of information about them because we tend to give up a little bit too much online because we feel like it's safe. But also it's a powerful tool that they utilize to exploit people. So what are some of our complexities with it? When you suspect something is going on and you look at somebody and say, "Hey, are you being trafficked?" Again, first off, odds are they don't know what it is. And secondly, they may be really, really hesitant to say anything. And some of the reasons are, if they're still living in the trauma of what's going on. Us expecting somebody to talk about what's happening to them during it's a bit much. They aren't necessarily going to be able to do that. Remember, more often than not, 70% of the time, it's somebody who they have a relationship with, be it parents or an intimate partner situation, right? That's another reason why somebody may not want to say anything and speak out. They might want the things to stop. They want the abuse or the things that don't feel good to stop, right? But they maybe don't necessarily want this person who they love to get into trouble. So some of their reactions, the shame and embarrassment that goes around it, the whole idea that they may be being judged, that sense of duty or loyalty to their trafficker, if it's somebody who they care about, fear of reprisals from the trafficker, getting into them being held accountable or responsible if somebody does something and being hurt. And a lot of times they just don't trust our institutions, and with reason. I mean, yes and no. Sometimes too, we have the best interests we think at heart, but it's not necessarily the best thing for the person who's in front of us, which is really important as we've got to look at people and who they are and who that person is in front of us. So how does that show up? Refusing services or assistance, full on. I can tell you from being in the emergency department too, people can get really, really sassy about stuff, like, how dare you ask me this? I personally believe in all of my years of doing this type of work, period, what we're here to do is plant a seed. It doesn't have to take root right then. It doesn't have to produce anything, but planting a seed of like, hey, I see you. I'm worried. This doesn't look right. I think goes a really, really far way. And I've heard that from people with lived experience, both with trafficking and domestic violence. So it's planting a seed. And if they do get a little sassy, it's not about us. You're okay. All right. I'll leave you be. Somebody being shut down too. Like I'm not going to engage with you. I'm not going to talk. So you might see somebody who a lot of times we expect somebody who's had a traumatic experience to have all of this emotion. Frequently they don't. Sometimes they are just shut down and there isn't a lot to hear. They don't necessarily want to participate with law enforcement. That's okay. I think, again, a lot of us, myself included, right? I want somebody to be held accountable. I want to make sure that we're taking care of them. But that's what I think they need. It's not necessarily what they need. And I need to let go of my own ideas about them. And like I said, they could be pretty sassy sometimes. I've been called a few names over the years, especially working at Denver Health, if you're familiar with that at all. Where we see, so, here in 2025, I think most people understand-ish what sex assault and domestic violence are. They don't necessarily understand what trafficking is. And so how we have, I don't want to say identified, but how we've identified some patients who have been trafficked has been through them coming in with a complaint of sex assault or domestic violence. And it's asking a few more questions. It's going a little bit deeper. So we had a patient, this was 2020, and it was December 2020. So it's in the middle of COVID, right? Everything is a mess. She had 4 or 5 kids. She lived in California. Her brother had called her and said, hey, do you want a job? She's like, yeah, that would be great. I need one. He's like, yeah, I'm doing some work in Colorado. So she sends her kids to her mom in Nevada, and then she hops in the van with them with another group of people, and they were working in a warehouse, doing some work in this warehouse. They were sleeping in the warehouse. Again, brother was trying to be helpful and had everybody's identification, all of their stuff. He was holding on to that for them. They're all living in the warehouse. He was not. And working. And so one of the other people in there had sexually assaulted her. And that's why she ended up coming in. She actually called EMS after the sex assault and was brought in. As we're talking to her and caring for her, it's like, wait, hold on a second. This sounds like it could be trafficking. And and she's like, my brother, wait, how is that trafficking? And we got down the path of like, yes, it was like textbook labor trafficking, but it was the sex assault that had brought her in. And, and just to put this out here too, like it was 2020. So, 5 years ago, when we have an officer who is a lovely, lovely man, I adore him, who is in the hospital Thursday through Monday. And when the nurse had reached out to him and was like, hey, look, I think I have labor trafficking, he had no idea what she was talking about. So that was only 5 years ago. Super open, like, hey, explain this to me. But it's also, remember, not everybody knows those nuances. And if we don't know about it, if we don't get training, we're not going to be able to help people. There was another instance too where we had seen it was a gentleman who he was an American citizen, owned nail salons, and he was from a village in Vietnam, and he would go back there. He was very supportive in that village, very, very respected, and he would take some of the women out to the United States. He would be like, I've got your visa, I have all of this, to come and work in his nail salons. And parents were happy to send their daughters with him because he's so well respected, right? Well, then they would get here. He would have all of their paperwork so they can't leave. They were living in the nail salon, but he would also sexually, because they now owed him more money. So when they would get here, he was like, you owe me money for your visa and your this or that. Which, you know, you can never work off actually, right? But so then he would sexually assault them though and record it and threaten to send it to their families if they do anything about it. So he had multiple salons. Obviously, people could walk in and out, but that coercion, that fear of that being exposed to their families was enough to keep them there. Well, one day he assaulted one of the women and she just had had enough and she walked out the door. She came to the hospital, and that's how we figured out what was going on. So she was being labor trafficked, but it was the sex assault that pushed her in. If we have a situation where 40% of traffickers are intimate partners, you know, there's the domestic violence part to it. And it's just, again, asking some extra questions. You know, we talked a little bit about some of the vulnerabilities for our newly arrived immigrants. You don't have access to legal markets necessarily to work. Like I talked about those people from before. There's no housing, you know, poverty. All of those things are, I just want you to realize those are just vulnerabilities that can be exploited. Addiction is a great tool of coercion, be it finding people, you know, perpetrators will hang out outside of rehab facilities to bring people in, offering them some drugs. Here, let me help take care of that addiction for you, that, you know, let me keep feeding you drugs. And then the threat of withdrawal. If you've ever watched somebody go through withdrawal, it's awful. It is absolutely awful. And people will do things to avoid withdrawal. So addiction is a great way to have leverage over a human being. You know, and I think the other thing is when we talk about our own biases, we can't look at other human beings as being less than or unworthy or not, you know, not worthy of our care or concern. Traffickers are banking on us to look at somebody and go, oh, they're just a drug addict. Oh, it's just a prostitute. Oh, it's just an illegal, right? That's the whole idea, is traffickers are absolutely hoping and counting on us to ignore those people, to turn our heads the other way and not feel that those people are worthy of the same types of things. So why don't people say they need help? I mean, I again, think about your domestic violence, people who've experienced domestic violence. They don't stand up and ask for help. They don't identify themselves necessarily. So what are some of the reasons why somebody who's being trafficked won't say something? Maybe it is a language issue, but maybe it's they just don't even know what's going on. Maybe they just don't have the words for what's going on. They don't understand that it's trafficking. They're worried that you are going to, or not you personally, but that they're going to be judged. They're worried that they might get into trouble. You know, when we talked about the girl who was working at the strip club, I mean, she was afraid that if she went to the police, they would say that she was a prostitute and she would get into trouble for it. You know, assuming that distrust of, if you've been raised also to not trust and being told you don't trust law enforcement and don't trust the systems, you're certainly not going to reach out to those systems. And you know, you can be isolated. Somebody who is being trafficked, there's a really good chance they're with another group and they don't have access to other people. So they're isolated. So we may not see them. We had a kid, I'd had a 14-year-old who was here I want to say he was here from Columbia, and I took care of him. He was working on a construction site, full time working on a construction site. He looked like a kid too, by the way. And it was a bystander saw somebody strangling a child. It was his boss strangling him because he broke something, and his boss was angry and that. And when I saw this kiddo, I was like, "Hey, wait, why aren't you in school?" And he's like, "Oh, I can't. I have to earn money to pay for stuff." Now, mind you, this was in Englewood, Colorado. So this is not a rural area where people aren't going to necessarily see him or see things. And there was no question, is there any 14-year-old kid that's allowed to work full-time on a construction site? Like, it's not safe. We don't allow that. It doesn't matter. Our laws, our labor laws cover everybody, regardless of what your immigration status is, what your age is. It covers everybody. We have child labor laws that cover all children. You know, our wage laws cover everybody who works here. Our minimum wage laws cover everybody. It's just people don't know. They don't necessarily know that they have any rights. So what are some of the indications or identifiers? Here's one of the things that I think is really important. If you Google human trafficking, this is what you see, right? Young, pretty, hypersexualized girls. I mean, that's what I am noticing though more in airports, they show different photos now, but forever, this is what it was. If you go to the bathroom in the airport, this is what you would see. But if that's all you're looking for, this is what you're gonna miss. You're gonna miss the other people who are being trafficked. You know, and this quote actually speaks a lot. It's like, I got upset when I realized what he was doing, but I kept doing it because he made me feel like I was special. That relationship, you know, things along those lines. So again, they exploit those vulnerabilities in patients. And it doesn't look like my video is going to show. I don't really have, I think we're getting close on time anyhow. It's just a great video that it's like a minute long, and it shows this man, he signs a contract to go and work in another space, that he's going to get paid, he's going to have housing and all of those things. And then it just shows him on the work site working basically sun up to sun down. When he goes, his paperwork, his passport is taken. When he goes to get paid, they're like, "Oh no, because your paycheck is going to pay for your housing, your you know, all of those things." And he's also isolated from his family. I'm sorry, it's not going to play though. So what are some possible indicators? It would be great, right, if we had a checkbox and it's like, hey, if a person calls with this or you see this on scene, it means that. It's not the case. But these are some things that could potentially stop and give you pause. You know, again, like that kiddo, not licensed for the type of work they're doing. They're with somebody who won't let them speak for themselves. Lots and lots of injuries, or injuries that because they don't have access to safety equipment and such. So what can you do? And just so you know, everybody, like I said, you're going to get these slides, you're going to get all of this. So what can you do? Training is huge. You all being willing to spend 45 minutes with me, even if you were forced to because it's a meeting that you had to go to, I really appreciate it. It's this little bit of training, and understanding a little bit of what the nuances are is going to make a difference. Maybe you have a conversation with somebody today, like, "Hey, did you know this?" Spreading that around, trying to get rid of some of these myths, getting my Aunt Sherry to quit sending me posts about how to avoid being trafficked. One of the other things is we have to help with those vulnerabilities. We have to help meet needs, and that helps. So some of the basic needs, I will tell you that it's really important if you're interacting with somebody who is being trafficked is to ask them what they need. We all think we know. We don't necessarily know. What do you need? That I think is sometimes one of the first things that we can do. So the hotline, here's the number to the hotline. I have utilized it many, many times to call and to talk through things. They are a tip line, so you can call them up if you see something. There was a massage parlor that opened up just down the street from a friend of mine has a grooming shop, and she's like, right next door to me is this massage parlor that has queen size beds in it. And one of the girls who works there came over to videotape the dog grooming place to send her family. She called it in as a tip to the hotline. So they have those trusted providers and people who they can reach out to. So that's one thing. Referrals, asking, again, I've utilized them to like, hey, help me talk through this with you. But also referrals for patients who need things. You can give them the trafficking number. And I have really, really gone on to a sort of universal education approach with a lot of things. So when I have an an adolescent who's unhoused and we talk about being trafficked potentially or whatever, and they're like, you have no idea what you're talking about. Sometimes I'm like, hey, look, just because of your situation, it makes you high risk. So you or somebody who a friend of yours could have this happen. Can I give you this number and you can reach out to them if you ever have questions? Have them put it in their phone. Obviously, don't have them put it in their phone as the Colorado Human Trafficking Hotline. That would be problematic potentially because abusers and exploiters usually have access to all of their stuff, but maybe it's a pizza place. Maybe it's something else to put it in there under. And this is exactly what they do not. So our trafficking staff, our hotline staff does not respond to the scene of a crime. They don't come to the hospital. We are not investigators. We don't make the actual legal determination that trafficking has occurred or provide mental health counseling. They don't do that. However, they can they can take tips, they can give resources, they can help navigate, they can do warm referrals, those things which I think make a huge difference. And when we talk about protocols, having a protocol, you all know, right? When somebody calls with this complaint, you've got your protocol and the questions you ask and what you do for them and kind of where you go from there. It's the same type of thing. Having an idea of like this, from what I'm hearing on the phone, sounds really worrisome to me. What do we do from here? And that's what we're here for. We will help you put together a protocol if you need one. It does not have to be a 300-page document. It can be one sheet with some bullet points if need be. Getting the training in the front end is the most important part here. All right, that was incredibly fast. Again, I will send you my contact information if you have other questions. It looks to me like we have about 4 minutes if anybody has a question or anything that they want to talk about. Sorry, I know I talked at you and I talked very fast. That's obnoxious. I'm sorry.
Does anybody have any questions for Michelle?
I was going to ask a question. So you don't have law enforcement ability. So if someone calls the tip line, what do you do?
Well, so because law enforcement isn't always necessarily the answer. Now, if somebody is under the age of 18, we have mandatory reporting issues. But sometimes it is someone who wants to talk to law enforcement, and we have trusted providers in our law enforcement agencies who we call. So people who we know have been specially trained to potentially reach out to that patient. It's kind of like asking your average patrol officers to have all of the training, and they don't necessarily. Hopefully they have a basic idea of things, but then we can escalate it to somebody who's had additional training if somebody wants to talk to law enforcement. Now, maybe they don't want to talk to law enforcement. And so I'm talking, all right, hold on, because I'm actually going along the lines of referrals. If you're calling as a tip, if that's what you mean, is that what you meant?
Yes.
Okay, so if you're calling as a tip, we're going to call over to, in this case, it was Arapahoe County, it's Littleton, and called over there, and we talked to our person that we have a relationship with, who has special training. So,
Thank you.
yeah, we're not investigating things, right? So, but we have the ability to talk to somebody who has special training. Anything else? Like I said, I'm going to send out lots and lots of references, or, lots of information to you all, including the slide deck, and my information's in there. So if something pops up or you have a question, please don't hesitate to ask. And if you decide, I want more training, I want to actually get into this a little bit deeper, or I think it'd be worthwhile at my agency, please let me know. Because like I said, we do them in person, and then we do them also virtually. So we're here. We don't charge you. We're here to just help educate people. So thank you all so much. Thank you for your attention. I really, really appreciate it.
It was great, Michelle. Thank you very much.
And also thank you for the job that you do.
I like this job. Thank you for yours, because I couldn't do what you all do. Take care.
Thank you. Okay, next item, PUC staff update, Jennifer.
Standing reports?
Yes.
Got it. Okay, so the standing reports, as a reminder, go out ahead of time for review. And so I will scroll slowly through. I do not have anything new to add that isn't already in the standing report. I want to thank Deb and Greg and Lauren for being here. Sorry, got distracted. Deb and Greg and Lauren for being here to do the next GIS informational series this afternoon following the meeting. So thank you for that, and thank you for continuing that series. Carl wanted to point out, and this is something really good to point out, but I'm gonna let you do it since you got the email up. Sorry.
Nina sent out an email earlier this morning that the US Senate last night did pass the Enhanced First Responder Act, changing the classification for dispatchers, emergency communication specialists. So I think that's definitely, I think that's furthest it's ever gone.
Yeah, I think you're right. I know that the last paragraph of that talks about a companion bill in the House. But this is definitely forward progress, so that's a good call out. Thank you. Yeah, progress. But I will happily answer any questions that anybody has on the standing report for the PUC. All right.
And the next item is VSP report, Lumen.
Superintendent Tressa.
Typically, yeah.
We don't have anything to add today.
And Toronto, any updates?
I don't think Ryan was on.
Okay. Kimberly says no updates from the bylaw committee. And then Jackie, do you have anything to add besides what's in the report?
Oh, get your microphone button. Sorry.
There we go, Jackie. I don't have anything to add, but I do want to really point out that now is the time to start getting your legislatures into your centers. I'm currently working on a list. I couldn't find on the internet a place that had the districts and their counties listed. Maybe I'm just lost on the internet. So I've been trying to gather that data and put it together in a spreadsheet. But please, please, please don't hesitate to reach out if you need any help reaching out to your state and state senators and state House representatives so that we have some visibility there. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Jackie? Next item is the 988 report, John.
So he had to, Norman and John or Nate had to jump off, but they wanted to send a update that everybody should be receiving a survey from Connie Johnson regarding the use of 988 shortly, which will help them to prioritize their partnership efforts. And if anybody's interested in establishing a backline with our 988 contact center, they can reach out to Norman and Nate, and I will put their emails into the standing report. But I highly encourage agencies to establish that backline, even if you don't intend to transfer 988 calls or calls to 988, they will at some point need to transfer calls to you, and that backline can streamline that process.
Thank you. Next item is the equal access, and Holly needs to vacate her position as chair. And so we'll be needing to look for a chair for that committee. Do we have anybody that'd be interested in that in the room or online? Okay, the next item is outage committee chair vacancy. The chair is vacant. Daryl, I know you've been kind of filling that role. Do you have anything for the outages?
Just that the current active list of investigations is always available on the 911 program website. I have been kind of filling in as the de facto chair simply because we don't have one. I do think it would be better to have a separate person be chair of that committee than me, just for a little bit of separation there. But if nobody else will do it, I'm willing to continue serving in that capacity.
We do have this on the agenda, but is anybody interested in the outage committee chair position? We could reach out with more information, what's entailed. Okay. Next item is broadband. Is Kristen on the line? Or in the room? Okay. And then prepaid collections committee, Jackie's been working on this. Do you have anything to provide an update?
I do not have an update. Any questions, let me know.
And then Steve for the ESNet user group. Unmute.
Can you hear me now? Sorry, I forgot to push the button for people online. A few quick updates. The group has expressed a significant amount of frustration when it comes to the logistical coordination of the subs and the subs of subs when it comes to the entrances to our PSAPs. And the vendor CenturyLink has heard this for the last couple, 2-3 meetings, and it actually seems to be increasing significantly. So yesterday's meeting, they committed to going back to the drawing board with some executives to be able to rethink the best practice to provide the 911 community a quality service for logistical coordination. In the meantime, we're juggling no-shows and work orders that the people doing the work don't exactly know which project it's for, and so on and so forth. So I hope by the next meeting, and we're happy to meet offline if we need to chat with CenturyLink about best practices or maybe some coordination suggestions. We really want to partner and make sure this stuff doesn't continue. Additionally, late last night, I sent a request to Tim. After the meeting, we had a gathering of just the PSAPs and the authorities yesterday, and everybody agreed that we'd like some more time on the tariff advice letter. We were asking Tim to push it out 30 days. We recognize this creates a little bit of a conundrum with the potential rate setting that's coming up, but we really want to get this right, and we're close. And we think the partnership so far with CenturyLink has been great and back and forth, but there's still more to think through and pricing to look at. So we respectfully requested to support CCOA's 30-day push. And lastly, there's a special meeting that Daryl's going to be hosting for the UG later in the month. That's all I got.
Thank you. Any questions for Steve? Okay.
Wait,
Kimberly, go ahead.
Thanks, Carl. Thanks, Steve. I was just wondering if Tressa could give an update on the request for that tariff modification and extension that CCOA and now the EUG has asked for.
I don't have an update on that right now. Tim has been emailing, but he's also been traveling this week. But we do have emails and things going back and forth and a meeting on the calendar for that.
Do you have an idea, Tressa, of when internally you guys will be wrapped up with your discussion and you'll be able to let us know what CenturyLink's position is? Because we do have a small window before it goes into effect, unless somebody intervenes.
I completely understand. I don't have an ETA, but emails are flying pretty rapidly this morning. So hopefully we'll know something very, very soon.
Okay, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and it'd probably be better to push it out 30 days in case somebody does intervene to extend that 30 days. I mean, I think it'd be less complicated if they just push it out. Anything else? GIS committee, Matt, is there anything in addition to your report?
No, thank you to the volunteers noted in the report.
Okay, next item is PSCS report. Is Deanie on the line?
I am, and I don't have anything further.
Okay. WIC update, Amanda. Seeing nothing from Amanda. Next item is no update from Connie for the Division of Fire Prevention Control report. Connie, any addition to the Colorado 911 Resource Center update?
Maybe no addition. I have not sent out a second request on the survey that Norm and Nate were referring to. We do have 12 PSAPs identified as having a relationship with 988 and still waiting for more responses.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Connie? Next item is Rapid SOS update. Karen or Sam? Colorado Training Standards Institute, CJ.
I don't think CJ's on, but I can give an update for the Training Standards Institute. We had a meeting on Tuesday. The significant items to share out of the meeting is that the Training Standards Institute group is going to be working to rewrite our modules with and ensure that the material that is listed in the new voluntary minimum standard is also represented in the Colorado Training Standards Institute class materials. We went through and aligned, and there is a lot of material that's already in our materials, but there's a lot that needs to be added because the national standard was updated significantly. Incidentally, that national standard is back on track to be released soon. I don't have a date for that yet, but I've been assured that they're working on it. So we're working on updating our modules, and the CTSI is also going to be coming to this task force and other public safety professional organizations to ask for adoption of the voluntary standard. So more on that to come probably next meeting.
Next, thank you. Any questions for Jennifer? Okay, next item is CCOA. I see Boulder is the newest member, so we're up to 27 members for CCOA. Kimberly, do you have any additional information?
I just have a long report in here today, rebaselining what we are and what we're doing and how to join the CCOA. So I encourage 911 authorities, if you're on this call and you're not part of the CCOA, to come join us. We're doing some pretty amazing and critical work and representing the 911 authorities with a strong voice and advocacy. So please consider joining us if you're not already a member.
Okay, any questions for Kimberly? Next item is 911 Services Enterprise. Michael.
No additional, thank you.
Thank you. And then the old business, we kind of discussed the outage committee chair vacancy. If you would like to be the chair, please let us know. We also need a project management in charge. Tracy or Jeff, do you have any update?
Is Tracy on?
1 second.
I can give what I have, but I don't know if she had. Okay, so we have had some calls. Steve Deloche has been a key player in this, and we're moving forward with getting the final details as far as what those charges are outlined. So I'm assuming this item is specifying the charges in regards to the tariff, or what was this in regards to? Just the projects that are going on currently?
I don't recall, but I believe it may have been those that are working with Carbine.
Right. Yes, we've
Yeah.
had conversations with all the PSAPs that are doing that now, and we're moving forward.
I think we heard yesterday in the ESNet users group that you're also moving forward with updating tariff language.
I believe so. I'll have to get back with Tressa and Tim on that.
Any questions for Jeff? Oh, Matt, did you have, Kimberly, go ahead.
So for those that haven't been part of the conversation, and I don't know, and I've been part of the conversation, I don't know if I'm tracking well, when would we expect to get these project management fees? Is it all CPE replacements, only ones that are going to be cloud-based? Is it discretionary? And what will those fees be?
The fees, I'll have to go back and double check with Steve Deloche on this, but as far as when the fees would be expected, as far as invoicing, typically when the project is done. As far as the project itself, right now, the only ones that we're seeing are going to be the cloud-based specifically towards Carbine. And it's not just because it's Carbine, it's the configuration that they have requested, and they've actually requested our project management. when there's changes that are going to be required by Intrado, that would also be applicable as well. Did that answer your question?
And
I think
yes,
okay, I
Go
think you
ahead.
had one other one as far as when to expect to see that language.
I was wondering when the fees, what the fees were, so you'll have to go back and check on that, and then just when.
Right.
What
Okay.
kind of discretion are you using to apply them? Because I know we changed our CP and we were not charged, and then other PSAPs are changing their CPs and are being charged. So it sounds like it's cloud-based. And whether or not CenturyLink determines that the configurations are more involved than a traditional CPE switch out, is that a pretty good summary?
Correct. And I think part of the bigger piece of it's going to be whether there's going to be configuration changes needed to be done to the routers that Intrado has access to make those changes. That's where their involvement would have to come into.
And then your tariff language cleanup is because the current tariff doesn't really clarify that you can charge project management fees for CPE changes. Is that right?
I think, yeah, I think that's part of it. I think also it was drafted prior to the implementation of any cloud-based services too. So that's what we have to go back and look at.
This is Andrew. I think the other thing that we talked about was Steve and you guys had said that kind of best practice long-term is to make sure that these cloud-based phone systems, regardless of vendor, are actually tied into your POIs and all of that.
Right.
That is a discussion that we need to have as far as what is the actual cost associated with making that happening for CenturyLink, and then how do we build that into the tariff? Because that's something that we're certainly as a state desirous of doing. Those of us that are on Carvine want to get rid of the button hook, programming. So we definitely want to move forward with getting to that end state. And I know you had brought up, concerns about, all right, where does the area of responsibility, begin and end for the ESINet versus the CPE vendor?
It's maybe a small issue, but like how Tracy will bring in the reports of how the QoS is and stuff. Where does that happen if it's going to a cloud? I can't hang a device on a cloud.
So I might propose then.
I mean, it's just one little piece of it that has to be passed.
Well, so maybe Steve, as a part of the ESINet user group, what we could do is this could be something that the ESINet users group could kind of take on of, let's have the technical discussion, right? Get the technical experts in the room about how we design that delineation of responsibility. Then we can have a discussion about the actual costs. And then do we bake this into the tariff as something that is a shared cost for everybody, assuming that we're all going to be moving to cloud at some point? Or is it customers that are making the decision to go to cloud today that are covering that cost? But that's all stuff that we've got to iron out. And I would like to propose that we get that process started sooner rather than later.
I think it's a good place for it. It's the right audience, it's the right people, it's the right minds. So if you're open to leading, at least being the point of contact for it,
sure.
It's probably a good landing spot.
Okay.
Matt, go ahead. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you. My question was mostly answered. I was seeking information on CenturyLink's thinking for a timeline about amending the tariff for these issues.
That we'll have to get with Tim and Tress on.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else, any questions? Okay, next item, CenturyLink Customer Service Issues Tracker, Jim or Jeff?
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. And I realized when I sent that over to you, I put it on the closed side. It was late when I updated this, so I'll send you an updated copy that I've got.
Okay.
So off of,
On the open tab or the closed tab?
go ahead and on the closed tab, please.
Okay.
That's when the updates were done. So, At our last meeting, we talked about quite a few different things, and the takeaway that I had from this, Jim and I talked about it and captured some of the key points on this. And this is totally open for discussion. We're willing to make changes to this as needed, and working to improve the communication that we have and the customer service effort. So off of this, the first thing that was taken away was the single page document. And Kevin worked with Jackie on this, and I believe that we have almost the call flow diagram, sorry. We have that complete. Was the call flow completed, Kevin?
It's a work in progress, but essentially completed with some edits to come pending.
Right, because the other item on it,
The call flow for the EZNet users group purpose will be great the way you have it. The one we were gonna make edits to was the one that the legislative committee wanted to put in front of legislators.
okay, thank you. Second item was in regards to cybersecurity. That had come up as a talking point, and I've reached out to Intrado and Motorola also to see what they have available, because those are the two vendors that we work with primarily. Looking specifically to see if there's something that is primarily call handling agnostic cybersecurity offers that would be specifically for 911 call handling. So that's still in progress. The possibility to have Lumen work with the lobbyists in regards to the education piece, after having a conversation with Tim Tressa and a couple others, my eyes were open and I didn't even think about this. That would actually look possibly as a conflict of interest. So that's something that we wouldn't be able to go forward with. The issues as far as tickets being closed with our NOC prior to notification or working with the PSAP community itself, that's going to be with our NOC. We reached out to them and leadership there agreed that it has happened in the past. They do want to get this rectified so it's not happening, and they would need specific examples. So if this is still happening, the biggest ask is let us know, send us ticket numbers, send us specific examples, and it's more than likely a coaching opportunity at this point that they'll go back to the actual technician that worked on that ticket, and we need to work with the community itself to be able to get that rectified. Any questions at this point? Okay. We had also talked about a one-way audio issue at Aurora that also happened at Lake County. I sent an email over to Tina, and we will work with her as soon as we get that information back and see if there's something that we can help with in regards to making that better, if it is a problem with the system itself. The last item on here was the accountability. There were several items that fell under that. And so I broke them out into bullet points. To hold Lumen accountable to the tariff itself, provide a single point of contact for escalations, implement cross-training for the techs on next-gen equipment, Intrado routers, and to avoid the delays in repairs, ensure proper notification for dispatch of service, establish a clear threshold for requiring mandatory escalations. So out of that, we've talked a little bit internally as far as how do we go forward with this? These are big asks in some of them, and it's not something we just can chop away at. So off of that, Jennifer, if you can scroll over to the items that I put as the update.
Doesn't give me an option of being scrolling on the right.
Oh my.
I know.
Okay, well, I'll put what we've got so far on this. I know, and my copy that I've got here is actually acting a little funny. You have to make it very small. So as far as holding Lumen accountable, the takeaway we had on this internally was, I think we need to discuss this a little bit further as far as what the PSAP community means specifically about this. So there are a couple of them that we need to get a little more clarification, and possibly like we've done with special meetings that have been set up, possibly look at taking this one particular item for accountability for Lumen and set up a special meeting to start talking through some of these points to get a little clearer and to get a better idea of what we're looking for. So we personally want to be able to find out if there's specific examples of the accountability towards the tariff itself. The single point of contact on this one, and Jennifer, you updated the contact and escalation list, right? You put that document on there as well? Okay. There is a new update. There aren't many changes to it at all, but we did make a couple of changes. So to actually specify a single point of contact for everything is challenging because that's such a broad subject when we look at it. So we have this available, we've had it available, and like I said, we just made this update. In this particular case, for service issues, getting a ticket open is always the first path to getting it remedied. Beyond that, if you need some type of escalation, if you're not seeing the status updates, if you're not seeing the issue resolved, the first point of contact in this would be Andrew, and his contact information's on there. He then will get the ticket number and do the escalations internally that are needed for this. In the level of how escalations work, outside of the president and the FAA, 911 is the next in the line of getting things taken care of. So if there's an outage or there's a major issue, I'd love to say it's the first in the line, but President and FAA usually take priority over those. So for the Colorado community, that's where we're at. So if there is a ticket that's open and you feel that you're not getting the responses you need, reach out to Andrew initially, and we'll do what we can to be able to get that escalated. Beyond that, as far as giving a specific single point of contact for everything, it's very challenging to do that. And I think items could either be delayed because it's not the right person, and that's why we want to be able to go back to this particular list. Does anybody have any questions in regards to that?
But I think the reason why people wanted a single point of contact is because things were getting lost the way they were doing it with this now.
Even with escalation.
Okay. Then we'll need to take this back then. And I think this could be something that we could look at on a further discussion if we were able to set up a call for that.
Jackie, go ahead.
Would there be something like a email that gets everybody involved, you know, that we can use as our single point of contact? And then whomever is responsible can go, oh, this is mine, I'll respond, and you guys handle that internally. But we have one email to say, hey, this is what's going on. I don't really know who to contact, blah, blah, blah. And it goes to all of you. Similar, Carl has one set up for his supervisors, like, you know,
Right.
similar to that.
No, I like that idea, Jackie. I think that's something I'll take that back with Andrew and Tracy. Setting up a distribution list is not that difficult. So I need to make sure that everybody that's on this, and it wouldn't necessarily be everybody, it's going to be the first level of contact. I want to make sure that they have the buy-in on it and they're okay with it. But yes, I think that's a great idea.
So I guess I want to jump in with a comment. I think this topic is huge. I think the reason there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns there is because they represent 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different organizations at Lumen. And because there's a lot going on and there's a lot of complexity, and how communication happens across the top of that is a model that we need to figure out. And I'll be straight up honest with you, it's not a Colorado issue for me, it's across the country issue for me, because the complexity that you all see here gets repeated across the country. And so we don't necessarily communicate well across the board. There are times when things drop through the cracks, and we need to fix that because it's important. So for me, and I've been in the business for a long time, and I'm familiar with models across the country, I'm not going to sit here and say that the answer to this is obvious to me, because it's not. But I'll tell you, you know, and I wanted a chance to say this. I really appreciate being able to be with you all today. The meeting in Rifle was very important to me as well. And I've used that with my team many times in talking about the power of talking and putting our minds together and figuring out how we can do things better. Because you know, in the middle of the frustrations that we all experience, the one thing I think we can all agree on is we all want to make things better. And I think these kind of conversations can help us get there. Now, when I asked Jeff to put together the matrix that he is going through here, I'll be honest with you, the biggest reason for doing that was to build trust. To say, if we're going to say we're going to do things, we need to do them, because if we don't, trust gets broken. And so I would love to be a part of a conversation where we can learn ways that we can communicate where we don't kill you with information, but we give you the things that you need so you can see across what's going on. And that's not necessarily an easy thing to do. But I think we're all smart enough, we can figure it out. So whatever the structure is to kind of move through those conversations, you have 100% support from Lumen to be a part of those, because I think, and I've spent a lot of time in the past few months thinking through the customer experience at Lumen across the country. The issue that always bubbles to the top is communication. Always, always, always. It's the breakdown in communication. It's the questions not getting answers, the follow-ups not happening. Those things is what caused the problems. And so we need to fix that. So we're happy to be a part of it.
Thank you for that. And I think it's still ongoing because of the discussion yesterday. I don't know if you were on the call where they were talking about some issues with the Ethernet connectivity. I mean, both Steve and Kimberly expressed concern about, lack of communication that they were receiving, or conflicting communication that was creating all kinds of problems.
So and I wasn't on the call, was that specific to individuals showing up on location?
Right. And the email saying one thing.
Yeah, that I understand that the problem with that. And I'll check back in with the group to find out, what the path forward is on that. I understand things change, but kind of in the moment for different reasons, but it doesn't negate the fact that communication needs to happen. So if something's going to change, the communication's got to happen, that something changed. And that's a gap that's got to get closed.
Yeah, what I was referring to in my committee report was just that. And we also want to come to the table with you guys to have that conversation.
Sure.
But what's happening now is small, miscommunications or inaccurate information that, to be honest, they're small, but when you pile them all together,
No, it adds up.
it's exhausting. So, but we're here to work with you guys to make a solution.
And I know, and you all are so gracious to even sit down with us in forums like this and talk. And so I recognize that. But I think there's good work that we can do together on that.
And we do have a meeting already set up for that discussion internally for that. Tracy sent that out today. It's out in a couple of weeks, unfortunately, because there's conflicts, but we all are on that and going to work forward towards it.
The other thing I do want to say, so Jeff's a part of my team. Kevin, I work with Kevin all the time. Steve Deloche is his boss. He's not part of my management chain, if you will. He's actually in a different vice president organization. But I, because I am dedicated to 911 and because I work with all those organizations that you saw on that 5-column chart, I get a chance to see across the top of a lot of things. And please, if you're not getting satisfaction with what you need, please call me. Now I get the challenge of that because there's a lot of things, there's a lot of things going on, and I can try to be a catalyst to help out as much as I can. And so I wouldn't want to promise that if you call me, I can turn something like this. But there are going to be lots of times when I can turn things and get things done faster than Jeff or Kevin. And it's not, they're smarter than me, so it's not a function of that. It's just I sit in a different part of the world of Lumen. And so if you need something, if you have a question, then please reach out to me. Some of you have, and thank you for doing that. I think working together in that way, we can accelerate things where they need to be accelerated. So I understand, the challenges of folks who have decided to go with Carbine, and I agree with you. A hairpin technical design, not good. That's got to be changed. And we all, I mean, I think anybody who has any measure of vision into the future sees the power of cloud-based applications, whether it's call handling or whatever it is. And having the network infrastructure integrate with the cloud in a way that you don't have to put technical band-aids on it, it's going to happen. It has to happen. It's the most efficient design to take care of, you know, how these applications are going to be used. So we have complications to work out on that. I mean, we're breaking new ground with that in many ways. And so even like how Lumen works with Carbine and what expectations look like between our two organizations about what that looks like, we're sorting through that. It's not like us working with Motorola or Entrado on a CPE solution that we've been doing with them for 20 years. So I think some of the evolution that's going on with them specifically is the newness of it. But we're committed to work it out.
Thank you. Any other questions for Jim or Jeff?
We've got two more items on here.
Okay.
I'll go through them quick. So, the implementation cross-training for techs on next-gen equipment, that's something we need to work with Entrado on. And that reaching out to Entrado to find out how we get that started, because that is something I think with my background as a technician in this situation for the network here, it's a Lumen solution, but we have a partnership with Entrado that adds some complexity to it and ownership and making sure those lines aren't crossed. We have to have cross training. We have to have the ability to be able to have these things taken care of quicker. And I think this is a good step forward. So we're working with Entrado on that. To ensure proper notification of dispatch for services. And I think this was specifically looking towards issues with the network itself. If we have an outage or a potential outage, notification for that and notification of what's happening and updates and everything else, we need to work with a knock on that. Those are things that can be changed, but we need to be able to work with them. And I think we've done that in the past. We have shown some changes on those. But as Jim said at one point, we don't want to blast you with so many updates. We want to make sure that they're pertinent and it's relevant to what you guys are dealing with. So that has to be worked with on our knock. Excuse me. And the last one is going to be to establish clear thresholds requiring mandatory escalations. I know when we talked about that last time, we were talking about that at some point, an escalation has to be mandatory if you're not hitting these particular criteria and these thresholds. And that's what we want to look at as far as talking throughout the community, saying what are going to be those thresholds. We don't want to just say, these are what we're going to say the thresholds are. We want to work with you and establish a working model of these are the thresholds that we feel that are going to work well as far as this automatically would then go to level 2 or level 3 or whatever it's going to be. So.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, thank you guys for your engagement. Next item is 911 voting member vacancy. Morgan County has not made several meetings, so what we'll do is probably hold off until November to ask for votes because their thing ends this year and just appoint it for the next year. The other item is the accessibility voting member. We have a vacancy there, and I believe it goes until next year, doesn't it?
No, it ends in
Oh, okay. So that's another position. If you know anybody that'd be interested for either of those positions, please reach out to us. And then the next item is supplemental coverage from space. Daryl.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure everyone was aware. I attended a NASNA update on, thank you, on supplemental coverage from space last month. I think most people are aware, like I was, that T-Mobile has started providing this service where they have a partnership with Starlink. And if you are in an area that does not have cell coverage and it is able to get a satellite, you are able to send a text message to 911. They call it an SOS message and goes through a slightly different process than a regular text to 911 call. However, what I was not aware of until this update, and maybe all of you were, and this is, I'm preaching to people who already knew this, that actually goes the other way now, and they're able to do wireless emergency alerts through that same channel. And if the phone is capable of receiving it, you don't have to be a T-Mobile customer. If the phone is able to receive that band, they're calling it band 25, then you will be able to receive wireless emergency alerts, even if you do not have a cellular connection. I see this particularly being useful in areas of the state with the big national parks and state parks where there's not a whole lot of cell coverage, particularly in rural areas where there might be a lot of vulnerability to wildfires, which also means from your perspective that if you send out a wireless emergency alert for a large area that may include areas that do not have cell towers, you may be reaching people on their cell phones with those wireless emergency alerts in areas where you may not be accustomed to people getting those. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware that that is starting to happen. And I imagine that T-Mobile is probably only the first. You'll probably see that from other providers. And as I said, they don't have to be a T-Mobile customer. They just have to have a phone that's capable of receiving information in that band. If you have questions, I will probably not be able to answer them, but I will do my best to get the answer and come back to you. Steve?
So if you don't have the answer, that's totally fine. My understanding of coverage from space for wireless emergency alerts is the cone from satellite is obviously geofencing can be a challenge. Did they speak to anything about what that preciseness would be with respect to the polygon that we put into the software?
Absolutely. That is a very good question. And it might actually be, if I can get a hold of the same person who talked to NASNA, maybe I can get them to come to a future meeting of the task force, because that might be the best way to get those kinds of questions answered.
Thank you.
Yep.
So I just signed up for T-Mobile and I saw that as an option, and my phone's not compatible, but it's $5 a month to get that. And they say right on their website, you can, any phone that's compatible can sign up, whether you're a T-Mobile customer or not. So the emergency notifications, do they have to be registered to get that?
$5 a month. That fact did not come up in the NASNA presentation.
Well, part of that though is also that $5, you're not just texting 911, you could actually text your wife or anybody else.
Oh, I see.
So they're developing it to also do some data.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not just 911.
So that additional service may be for non-emergency use. Yeah,
And
that makes
I mean,
sense.
And iPhones still have the SOS mode, but the text to 911, because I did beta testing, it was smoother through Starlink.
I mean, I just signed up and I saw that and I thought, let me try that. And my phone's not compatible.
Obviously, I'm not an expert on this. My understanding is you do not have to sign up or register. The phone simply has to be capable of receiving it for the wireless emergency alert part. I think, the question of how do you geofence something that's from a
there's
transmitter in
GPS.
space.
GPS in a phone. I can visualize that. I don't know if that's true. My next question is, how much does it cost?
Well, so they're saying that it doesn't cost anything. You don't have to sign up. So
As a PSAP, you can send out that notification.
right, if you're sending it out through iPause and it's going through T-Mobile systems from iPause, it should go to anybody who can receive it.
Oh. You don't have to pick it. It just sends.
No, it's done seamlessly as part of the iPause/WIA alerts.
So I'm curious to know if that happened when Garfield County, when you guys sent out, oh no, it was Mesa County a couple weeks ago that sent out the alert about the explosion and people in Garfield County got it. I wonder if that was part of the reason that they got it.
No, that was coming off cell sites, but I mean, it overshot because I know Delta and I believe Montrose also got it as well. And I know the FCC is working on revamping the current iPOS system. They're asking for comments.
Yeah, they just issued this in August. They just issued a new notice calling for comments. They want to look at the whole alert system, as they're saying, from the ground up. So they may be planning some major changes to it.
And FirstNet did send out a press release within the last week or two that they've also been testing satellite, but they've also been doing voice. I think T-Mobile's plan is to go voice as well. But but FirstNet, it sounded like those tests were successful. So we'll probably see them as well soon, offering as public, or as public safety offering.
But Jennifer, I'll get the contact information for the person who talked to NASNA. Maybe we can get them to come to a future task force meeting
Okay,
or a lunch and learn.
sounds great.
Okay, we had kind of a discussion this morning, a little bit before the meeting started. I don't want to put Andrew on the spot, but I will. Do you want to kind of discuss that a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah, so a guy by the name of Jay Mallon, who has been around in the public safety technology space for a while, is developing a tool that essentially is designed to be a data aggregator for outages. Everything from a full EZNet outage to T-Mobile having an alley outage. And what his idea is, at least, is that, you know, for example, if T-Mobile is having an alley outage, his tool would be able to detect that in a matter of minutes based on historic data of T-Mobile calls coming into your PSAP and notify you faster than, you know, the carriers are notifying us. The kind of future end state would be an elimination of those obnoxious emails and 2 a.m. phone calls from all the carriers, to where we would only get notifications when it actually is an outage that is actually impacting our operation. There's a lot more technical stuff in there that I do not understand. But one of the things that I had a chat with him about is using the state of Colorado as a proof of concept, to where we could get him set up here to basically for free give the state of Colorado access to this application as they kind of work on their go-to-market. So obviously, I think a larger conversation needs to happen. Apparently, there was not anybody scheduled as a presenter for the November task force meeting, so we've got him added to that. But the stated objective will be to give him the opportunity to kind of explain what it is that he's building, better explain than I can the positives and the impact for Colorado PSAPs, and then we can decide, does this sound like something that we want to you know, work with them to implement, particularly if there's an opportunity for us to get it for free for a period of time, just as a proof of concept. So that will be happening in November. So anybody interested in learning more about that can attend.
Thank you. Anybody have anything else for the good of the order? Okay, we'll go ahead and adjourn. Our next meeting is November 13th. We do have a GIS meeting. Does it start at 1 o'clock?
It'll start at 1 and it's on a different link, which is also on the task force calendar. So this meeting will close and we will open it again probably five or so minutes before 1 o'clock and get started at 1.
Thank you. Thank you not Arapahoe, El Paso for hosting. Everybody have a great day. Bye.